Just a few days ago, British tech billionaire Mike Lynch was in Sicily, celebrating a big win. 2 months earlier, he'd been staring down the possibility of 25 years in prison on fraud charges in the US. But after his 13-year legal battle ended with his acquittal, he and his 11 guests boarded a $40 million superyacht, only to end up anchored in the wrong place at the wrong time.
A yacht carrying mostly British people was caught in a tornado.
According to survivors, sank in a matter of minutes.
And after the storm was over, we noticed that the ship behind us was gone.
15 people managed to escape the yacht, but Lynch, his daughter Hannah, and 5 others never made it out. The investigation into what happened is only just beginning. So there's still a lot we don't know. But to many watching this story, it's alarming how fast the vessel sank.
This thing went down quickly.
It's highly likely that given the fact that this yacht capsized and then sunk, that it actually had a direct hit.
As more information comes out, there are growing questions about how this happened and whether there's anything that could have been done to prevent it. The night before the Bayesian sank, it was anchored in a harbor near the village of Porticello, 300 meters from shore. Here's a picture of it, posted on Facebook and verified by Reuters, taken that night at around 10 p.m. You can see the 75-meter mast all lit up, and the sky and the water look calm. But it had been really hot in this part of Italy for weeks, and the temperature of the Mediterranean Sea was almost 3 degrees higher than normal. Extra heat like that increases the energy in the water and the chance of extreme weather. We know from the Italian Department of Civil Protection that strong thunderstorms were forecast over parts of Sicily through the weekend, and that they turned violent overnight in Porticello. You can see here CCTV footage captured intense wind and rain, blowing furniture over at a nearby restaurant. Locals in the town said the winds felt like an earthquake, and they said they saw a water spout, which looked something like this, a violently rotating column of air, similar to a tornado.
At around 4 o'clock, the waterspout hit the town. 15 minutes later, we saw a flare in the sea. Once the waterspout had passed, we went out to inspect. All we saw were cushions and the rest of the boat, which had sunk.
Now, it's not clear if the Bayesian was hit by a waterspout or if it was a downburst. This happens when heavy rain gathers overhead and the system weakens, unleashing a violent wall of wind and rain. Their wind speeds can be as strong as a tornado, more than 160 kilometers an hour.
They just happened to be anchored at the wrong spot and got hit with a direct hit.
A CCTV camera actually captured the yacht disappearing. If you look closely, the video shows the mast lights disappearing on the ship as it sank. Experts we spoke with say those extreme winds may have caused critical damage to the hull.
But if you break that hull and water enters, it can go down very quickly. So I'm going to guess that they're going to find a crack in the hull caused by the damage of the storm picking up and moving this yacht.
In case you're not super familiar with ship terminology, the hull is like the outer shell that keeps water out and protects the internal structure. If the Bayesian was in the direct path of a waterspout, it's possible it could be pulled upwards in the direction of the wind. That pressure could be enough to create a crack somewhere in the middle of the ship's hull, and water would gush in quickly. Some of the survivors reportedly said that in the moments leading up to the crash, they had felt as if the ship was being lifted, and then suddenly dropped, and that objects from the cabins fell on them.
A large section of this thing could have been picked up, at least a section of it, and split open, and the water just would just roll into it.
The Bayesian also had one of the tallest aluminum masts in the world, at a height of 75 meters.
Depending on how it's sitting in the water, you push real hard on that mast, and nothing else with a mast that high around it. That thing with the tall mast might just get pushed over.
Divers have said that the yacht is currently lying on its side in the seabed in one piece. And while we don't yet know for sure if the mast played a direct role in the sinking, experts we spoke to say it could be a factor.
It would be a calculus in the evaluation of how quickly or how fast the vessel would tip over.
While investigators continue to gather information about how this could have happened, there are also questions about preparedness. The CEO of the company that built the Bayesian has been quoted suggesting the tragedy is linked to a series of human errors. saying the yacht was, quote, one of the safest boats in the world, that it was, in his words, basically unsinkable.
Questo episodio sa di una storia incredibile, sia tecnicamente che come fatto.
He says in a storm situation, the boat should have been in full alert mode. Anchor pulled up, vessel positioned towards the waves, all the hatches closed, and guests and crew in one safe area. But of course, this wasn't your average storm.
This wasn't like a large storm coming through. This wasn't heavy seas or waves where you might take a protocol of, lifting anchor and turning bow into the waves. This was, I'm going to say, relatively fast event of a tornado. No different than what we have on land.
Everyone knew about the storm. And then, if a fisherman knew, why was the captain of such a ship of such importance, with guests of such level and importance, with 12 guests on board, why wasn't he in an alert situation?
But the more details emerge, the more likely it seems the guests were thrown into the chaos with very little warning. We know that at least one of the survivors said she was asleep on deck when the extreme weather hit. And then suddenly it was dark, and she found herself in the water in just a few minutes. And some of the missing passengers who were later recovered were found in their cabins.
Divers assisted by robots located 5 bodies inside the Bayesian. 2 were found between mattresses in one of 6 guest bedrooms.
These things do strike more or less without warning, and there is very little time, if any, to take preventative action.
Even if a storm alert went out, to predict a waterspout or a downburst that might strike your vessel, experts say that's nearly impossible. It comes out of nowhere.
You're talking about potentially 80, 90, 100 mile an hour winds circulating. It is like a train crash.
There are also theories around whether the crew shut all the doors and hatches, a protocol that should have been followed in the event of a storm. According to Italian media, divers who carried out underwater inspections of the boat reported that a hatch was open. If this was the case, water could have entered through the gap, flooding the vessel. But there's also the impact of the storm to consider.
I can't say again that these hatches weren't battened and maybe just opened up when the thing was lifted.
Considering how quickly this all happened, it's pretty astonishing that 15 people survived, including a 1-year-old girl. 7 people tragically lost their lives. Michael Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, Morgan Stanley executive Jonathan Bloomer and his wife, Judy, a charity trustee, Chris Morvillo and his wife, Nita, and Canadian Ricaldo Thomas, who was the ship's chef. Investigators have now shifted their focus to understanding what happened to the Bayesian that night. And we may even see charges laid in the future as they try and figure out just what went wrong.